Warning: this show contains explicit spoilers, nerdy language, thematic elements, and graphic discussions. Viewer discretion is advised. All right, welcome back, everybody. We got another good discussion for you this week, this day. We're going to be talking about Immortal Wonder Woman, and I have a great guest this time, Added Cheese. What's up, man?
Hello, everybody. Nothing much. It's been an interesting read, Wonder Woman. I am not that familiar with like DC or Marvel to begin with. Like Western comics are kind of a shady thing for me, and this was an interesting experience.
That's good. That's good. And yeah, man, we'll get into it here in a second. So, first off, I always like to see. So, what is your origin story? How did you get into comics, manga? I know you're more of a manga guy. You have a really nice little YouTube channel that you talk about a lot of different manga stuff on. So, how'd you get into all this?
It's kind of very similar to everyone who is into the weeby side of the internet, where it started at a very young age. Where of course, things like Pokemon when it first came out and all of those like Beyblade Duel Masters, but then it kind of died away for me. And then when I was, how old? I think I was like a 16, it really hit me. I saw my first proper like big anime and it was like, this is really good. And then I just casually watched a bunch of anime and read a bunch of manga. And it just kind of slowly grew from there. I think the big turning point was when I started watching One Piece like 5-6 years ago.
Nice.
And that was kind of like, that really made it big for me in terms of like Japanese media. I did keep up with a little bit of like Western comics as well, but that was only like when I was a child, of course. Things like Spider-Man, everybody likes Batman and that kind of stuff when they were a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And then like that just kind of died away when I started watching more anime. And then it just almost entirely died away, where now the only thing I keep up with is Warhammer 40,000 comics, because I'm also a huge 40k nerd.
Nice. I got a friend that recently got into 40k, so he's in there with his 3D printer and trying to get his armies together. I love it.
Yeah, it's one hell of a commitment to get to Warhammer. It's even more so than anime, I'd say.
I believe it. So whenever you first started watching anime, and it's funny because One Piece, about 5 or 6 years ago, I started my One Piece journey as well. So that really really shows you perspective of what like the GOAT is,
Yeah, One Piece is that is one hell of a journey.
It is. So what drew you to manga and anime? I know you said you got exposed to it when you were young. So what draws you in about it? What do you like so much?
I think it's I like to say in a lot of my videos that it's the little escape from the bleakness of reality. And for some reason, like manga and anime just offered that something for me that I didn't really find in other media that much.
Yeah.
Like I tend to go with manga that's less fantastical. Like I'm not that huge into things like battle shonen and stuff. It's more kind of realistic, but it still has that sense of otherworldly, and I think that's what really got me in. But of course, there is some bigger things, like of course One Piece that I absolutely love. That is very far there out there in the fictional world.
It is, yes. Everything from character designs to everything. It's all kind of wild.
Yeah.
So what are you? Give me some stuff. What are you reading right now? Like, what's good right now that you're reading?
Right now, well, one of my all-time favorites is again coming in both anime form, and I think they recently released a new manga, that being Golden Kamuy, which is a very interesting, like early 20th century Japan over in Hokkaido. The Russo-Japanese War has just ended, and there's a big hunt for some gold, and that is currently airing in anime form. Like, I think anime is probably in a better spot right now than manga. Manga is this is kind of time where there isn't that many releases over on manga side of things, but of course anime operates on a seasonal basis, and we just had the spring it's the spring season just started, so there's like a bunch of really big shows coming on there.
Yeah, man, a lot of good stuff. We're really eating good right now with manga and anime.
Yeah.
I mean, man, the animations, we're in the new golden age of animation for anime, I feel like.
Yeah, like I'm very much in the camp of old school anime is really good, but I do have to agree that modern anime on average is better.
It is. It is. It's just, man, I just feel like ever since episode 13 of Demon Slayer, and really kind of
Oh
Attack
yeah,
on Titan a little before then, really pushed the bar. Mappa's out here doing work. I don't think
yeah,
they did Demon Slayer, but either way.
yeah.
All right, so I tricked you into reading Immortal Wonder Woman, which is great. So
Yes, you did.
this was my first experience as well with Immortal Wonder Woman. I had not read this before, so I had to go out, and I'm a big floppy physical reading guy, so I had to go out and get my Immortal Wonder Woman, the whole 2-issue run of it.
I
and
can I understand the wanting to get them in paper. That's also my approach to manga always.
oh yeah, for sure, it's just better. That tactile feel is something good about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So with Immortal Wonder Woman, I really enjoyed it. Jen Bartel is the artist on this, and if for anyone that sticks around on my channel and knows, like, I'm a big Jen Bartel fan. I love it. She's doing all the She-Hulk covers coming out right now. She has a lot of covers mostly, so she doesn't do a lot of interior work. And this was, I think, her first interior work for the big two, which is really neat. I love her art. I'm a huge fan of it. And in this story, I thought it was cool because the softness of her art really contrasts with the really bleak, kind of desolate future they're telling and the tale they're telling in this story. I think that's really neat. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I did find the art very interesting. It is really, really nice art, but it's so different from what I'm used to that I found it like I found myself drawn more to the art than the actual story, which I found interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Which is neat because we read a lot of black and white stuff as far as manga
Yeah.
goes. So to see everything in full color and all that, it adds a different experience. I do read JoJo's colored, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
kind of like, well, that's awesome. Like that's one of the few that's good. Dragon Ball has, if you go back in like the Z arc or the up to Namek saga, I think they have it in color available, and it's just gorgeous, man. It adds another level sometimes, I think.
Yeah, I have to make a confession that I have never seen or read Dragon Ball.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a bad anime fan. Oh my god. But yeah, you're totally right with the colors. It's like there are some mangakas who've really mastered the black and white.
Oh
But
yeah.
then there's the whole thing of like color conveys feeling in a very different kind of sense than just black and white. Like you can make incredible effects without color, but there is just something more emotional when it's to add color to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I like the black and white, the art as a whole in this pretty solid. I know, just to compare to manga a little bit, manga is very dynamic in its art, and it's very dynamic panel to panel. And that's what you're there for a lot of times. Well, the stories are really good, but you know what I mean as far as, flipping through that dynamic art. And I thought this story did okay with the action scenes. Again, Jen Bartel does more covers than actual, like, all these characters in different poses and all that. So, but I still thought overall, pretty solid. I thought it was one of the high pieces, the high points through this.
Yeah. I think it's more like I think the art style would I more compare it to something like seinen manga. Say, it's not quite to the detail of say Berserk or Vagabond, but it leans more towards that. Like there is a lot more like finer detail everywhere, which I think comes from the doing cover arts more.
Yeah, I would assume. It does have some good detail in there. And then as far as the story, to give everyone a little background on what happens through these 2 issues is basically there was a key stolen in the past, and that's kind of the backup story with Nubia. And with the Wonder Woman story, we kind of see the outcome of a lot of things as far as the world is being eaten by, what's it called? It's like it's being undone, and we get to see kind of the last days of the universe really through this, between it taking over Apocalypse and Darkseid coming down for just to trade hands with, I guess, Superman and Wonder Woman one last time before everything goes, which I thought was really funny as far as it's just kind of petty for a big bad to like, you know what, everything's going to end. I'm going to leave all you dudes here that, are my henchmen and my children. And like, I'm not going to fight this thing. I'm going to go seek out Earth again. And just one last, just for old time's sake, to mess with things there. And I like that about Darkseid on this one. I thought it was fun.
Yeah, it seemed like initially just seems kind of disjointed, but when you can't like when I read a bit more about Darkseid, I'd also got that like it's very petty, but I also really enjoyed this. Is I think they called it the Undoing or something.
The
Like
Undoing. There you go.
it has that very like Lovecraftian, eldritch, cosmic horror kind of thing, which I totally didn't expect from what's essentially a Superman comic or a superhero comic. Which I think that was an interesting element to it.
Yeah, adding a little cosmic horror layer on it was fun. Especially it was kind of this slow creeping, like it's going to come. It's just a matter of when it takes over.
Yeah, that inevitability of everything that was interesting. It's such a different thing from, like, of course, horror kind of manga it's a thing, but I feel it's sort of similar with Western comics where like adding that kind of otherworldly horror element in something that isn't horror is really rare, and I think they executed that really well. Like the feeling of inevitability, and then the like emptiness of everything when Wonder Woman is just flying through the cosmos and there is nothing. Like that was really cool.
Yeah, really cool. We get into that second issue, and it's she's just flying through the void, trying to find life. Darkseid and Superman have had their final. They hugged it out to end it off, and went into the sun, and it blew up, and takes them both out. And then Wonder Woman is conceivably alone and just floating through the void. And I really enjoyed it, especially how you said kind of that very very much that Lovecraft element kind of snuck in there. And watching Diana have to try to keep hope alive and to keep a reason to fight alive, even though there is an inevitable ending to what is coming, which I thought was a cool kind of the through feelings, the through plot of a lot of it, which was neat. Like you said, it doesn't happen a lot whenever you throw horror into non-horror things. It doesn't always stick, but I do agree. I think it was executed pretty well in this one.
Yeah, that was like, I especially like the fact like when it goes like everything dies and they even the stars vanish, and then it's slowly from one panel to the next. There are moments where there's like a star in the background and then it's suddenly nothing, and it just conveys very well, I think, in this one.
Yeah. And the issue ends, the series ends, I guess, the run ends as Wonder Woman finds the Spectre floating out in space. And for comic fans, the Spectre is very much, I don't want to call him the spirit of vengeance because that's Ghost Rider's thing, but kind of the same thing. He's out for atonement, he's out for vengeance. He's this, universally strong character, and Wonder Woman finds him, and he's kind of a broken man there, just hanging out, and like, I knew somebody else was alive out there. I didn't know who it was. I'm glad to see you one more time. I'm glad to kind of feel your light, feel the hope coming off of you one more time, but it's time for me to go. And then leaves, Diana completely alone as the Undoing closes in, and we get our final, we can call it a fight scene, but it was more of a struggle than anything because of that inevitability, that creeping inevitability through this whole thing.
Yeah, there's something like very total about it, but there is still like, I like the last moment where she goes that she will still fight back, and it is that little spark of light in the empty darkness when she's already being swallowed by the Undoing. That was, I'm not sure like what it really made me feel like, but it was kind of like that human struggle of we're all gonna die someday, but might as well go out with a bang or something. It was a very profound kind of feeling. I'm not sure if that's the intended way of it conveying feelings to me, but that's kind of what I felt like.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, that drives right up there with that Lovecraft, horror element to it, as far as, the life's finite and it's scary because one time everything ends, whether it's whether it's Cthulhu or whether it's this creeping tentacled Undoing. And yeah, I agree. I thought the ending was it gave you some feels a little bit, which I wasn't expecting.
It was a very profound kind of ending with the whole thing, like what is a god when there is no one to worship them, and that all that talk before the end, like that was very surprisingly deep. Like I'm not sure if this is like, I'm again not familiar with DC, but I don't think this is very common in DC, like this kind of really big, profound thinkings and feelings kind of thing.
Not a lot of times, American comics, their characters, they're very much gods among people. So to kind of deconstruct that in this, as far as like, what is Wonder Woman now? Is she a god? If there, like you said, if there are no people, like what is the purpose? What does she do now other than do kind of one of her core, character things is, she's a warrior, and she fights to the end, and it was good to see that play out in a different context.
Yeah.
Then there's a big bad, we punch him a few times and he goes away. So
yeah, like my sense for American comics was very much the like old school Spider-Man, Batman kind of thing. There's a fight, we fight it out, the bad guy goes into jail and everyone's happy. And this was very different.
Yeah. And from the manga I read, I don't have a lot of good parallels as far as between this and that. There is always the shonen protag, of like, we keep hope alive, and we have to keep fighting till the end and all that. But very few times does it actually end that way. It never ends bleak.
There are, I could think this would be like more close to something like seinen, which is more directed towards adults, where bad things do happen.
Yes.
And I mean, it's still like manga also tends not to go to the finite ending of everything. There is always that spark of light, even if it's a darker series. Someone always gets out.
Yeah.
Which I think makes this very unique. This was more leaning to the way of the 40k stuff I read, which very often ends with the inevitable death of a planet and everybody dies and nobody's happy. Like this was more close to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's what's that's cool. Is American comics, a lot of things are broken into runs, and while there is continuity between the series, it's always nice to see a story like this that's kind of in that more Elseworld category, where it kind of sits alone on its own. Like I said, I didn't read Future State, so I don't know if this actually funnels into a larger scale, but Future State was not around for super long, and I don't think it was praised for being the best thing that was out at the time. So I would be curious if this actually does connect to other things. I don't think it does. It doesn't feel like it does. It's very, like I said, very finite, very closed ending, and I appreciate that in American comics every now and then, where we get a total story, we get a beginning and an end, and that's it. We don't have to read 4 other titles to tie it all together. So
yeah, I feel like the Nubia side of things would be suitable for continuation, like what happened in between.
Mm-hmm.
But I totally agree with the thing that it's really nice to see an ending, because a lot of manga also tends to do the thing that it just goes on and it goes on and it goes on, and it just feels like there isn't an ending. Of course, like shonen stuff tends to have like there is going to be an end, but especially isekai, it's often that there's just a new adventure, and a new adventure never ends. So it was very nice to have this kind of I don't want to say condensed story, but it was sort of a condensed story.
Pretty condensed.
But it had a beginning. Yeah, it had a beginning and an end, and that was really nice.
Yeah, and with being condensed, only 2 issues. Normally, when I have people hop on here, a lot of comic runs are 6 issues might be a small complete run, but having 2 was real short, very quick. Which I thought the pacing for it was well. I thought that things got explained enough to get us in there. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of build up before. We just kind of jumped in, but I feel like they gave enough, but not too much. They left some room for interpretation along the way, which I appreciate.
Yeah, there is that air of mystery, but it still explains the like important bits. Of course, like when I actually read this twice, because for the first time it feels like that kind of a story where there are hints to what's happening all the time, but you don't notice them on the first time. And I do feel like I got a more complete picture on the second read through, but there wasn't anything that I just didn't understand the first time around, which I think that's a very smart way of writing things. I'd compare this to something like I started recently watching One Piece again because a friend of mine recently got hooked to it, and they're like those tiny little like hints to what's to come, like the plans the author already had when they wrote this. Of course, it's a bit of a longer time period for One Piece from the beginning to where we're now. But I got that same kind of a feeling on the second read through, that there are tiny little hints to things, which I really enjoyed. Like,
yeah, it's always nice to see that. And man, with One Piece, like, man, Oda, the master of foreshadowing.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's ever going to beat that. But I did enjoy this one as well. Like, there was a little bit of foreshadowing here and there.
Absolutely. It was a fun, quick read. And as someone that I've just recently been getting into Wonder Woman as far as like reading her ongoing title and all that. So I've always really liked the character, but I hadn't had a lot of experience before. Maybe 3-4 months ago is when I kind of started to really pick up Wonder Woman and kind of dive into Diana's character a little bit more outside of her being on the Justice League per se, more her individual story.
Yeah, it was. I've also found this really interesting because Wonder Woman is someone who I practically only know from the DC movies. I have read some Wonder Woman comics, but those were stuff I found in like my grandma's attic, so they were probably from like the 80s or something. So like she is, I sort of know where she's coming from as a character, but I don't have any complete picture of what she's like.
Yeah.
And this also kind of felt like a story of Wonder Woman. Like, what is she like?
Yeah, definitely. I think it really highlights her compassion through it a lot too, and her, with the being in Thermoscata, the Amazonian tribe. I think Greek. It was. I always forget. It's rough, words, man.
I do.
They, highlighting her between being an Amazonian and an Earthling, they did good at the beginning for that to kind of highlight the duality of her, which is something
with swamp thing and like connection to the Earth and then to the Amazons, and that was really nice.
Yeah, when she's like, "Hey, we got to save the planet," and they're like, "We're trying to save us, dog. Like, doesn't matter. You were the one that had these connections out in the world. It wasn't us. Like, we're in it for ourselves." And that's definitely a character trait of Wonder Woman that always shows up, which is good that it got highlighted on that. But I think she was just a lot more compassionate, and just the despair that you could feel her feeling through especially the second issue was deep. It was heavy,
Yeah, there was I also really like the disparity between the scene where she goes into the Batcave and then meets the Amazons and the Swamp Thing, and of course all of that. But then there was as you mentioned, the compassion to humanity and life in general, not just the Amazons, and then later on, of course, the darkness and the despair and everything. But still, there was at the very end, there was still that fighting spark, which I got the feeling that is like the three major things of Wonder Woman. So it kind of gave me this complete image of what her character is like. I'm still not 100% clear on, is she like a proper god?
Yes.
Okay, so she is a deity.
She is a deity, yes.
Similar to Nubia's, was it aunt?
Kinda. I'm not sure. I don't have a lot of experience with Nubia, to be honest. That backup Nubia story was maybe the 4th issue of Nubia I've ever read in my life. Okay, so
right.
I assume it's the same because Nubia is the heir to the Wonder Woman throne, per se. At least the title, as the book showed. Yeah. But so I'm not sure if she is a full-on god or not like Diana is, but I would assume so.
Yeah. That is another thing that I don't really remember from that many manga, that you would have that kind of a distinction between a deity and a hero and then just the normal folk. You just have people with powers that are just part of society. Yeah. Which I think this highlighted very well, that the disparity between the Amazons and then Wonder Woman reminiscing about Batman was very, very much that we are above you all kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I loved the scene when she goes into the Batcave and it's, she talks to Bruce one more time, whether it was a hologram or just a memory that she had. Either way, I thought that was a good touch. Showed a little compassion from Batman, which you don't get a lot, which is always good to see, Dark and brooding only gets you so far, I think. Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed this 2-issue run. It was fun. It was good characterization from Wonder Woman. We got to see a little bit of Superman. Good to know that he was still kicking around. Old man Superman, but that's all right.
Yeah, it was weird seeing old man Superman.
Yeah, fully white hair was something else. And then Darkseid's still there, like, bro, Clark, we got to finish this, my guy. Like, I'm not done.
Yeah.
But Superman still made the play at the end. At the end of his time, he still made the play to, I'll take myself out to give Wonder Woman the chance to write this and to fix this and to carry on the hope and all that. And I thought that was cool. I think for a little bit, Wonder Woman was like, I wonder what the last thoughts of Clark was. Like,
yeah, there was her thinking like what went through his head when the sun exploded.
Yeah, and she's like, selfishly, I think she wanted it to be her, but she knows Superman, and he was only thinking of everybody else, which is that's the best Superman we get, is when he thinks about other people. I say this all the time. Clark Kent is the main character. Superman is very much his alter ego, where you get some of these other heroes, like even Wonder Woman. Like Wonder Woman is her identity, where Diana Prince in the real world is not as much. She's not really a secret identity person, but you see what I'm saying. And the best Supermans are the ones that have that compassion and that are into saving people and not just, I'm here to hit things really hard.
Yeah, it's the like human side of Superman is the main thing. Like it, of course, this is about Wonder Woman, so you don't really get that, but that's the like major thing I remember from Superman, from all of the recent DC movies and like reading comics as a kid. Like he always seemed like the everyman's hero.
Yeah. Very much so.
Yeah.
And I love that. I'm glad that they got that characterization right within this, and overall fun story. They didn't, they didn't do a lot with Spectre, which is fine because whatever, but everything else top to bottom, I thought this was pretty solid. It wasn't anything mind-blowing, but it was such a good, fun, different take as far as circumstances go to put Wonder Woman, a god, into.
Yeah, it felt very different from anything. Like the whole thing with Spectre, I think I really enjoyed, like he was sort of there to emphasize the thing that vengeance is in the end meaningless, especially when there is no one left to avenge when everyone's dead. Like I think that helped to create that sense of finality when he finally says that there is no one left. Like that was more of a reinforcing for the ending scene rather than anything to do with Spectre himself.
Definitely. Good exposition there from him. I appreciated that a lot. It was fun. So I know you mostly read Warhammer 40K, and now you've read Immortal Wonder Woman, and that can go into your Goodreads if you're a book reader for that. So how was the experience with the American comics? I know we talked about the color and the art a little bit, but as far as, reading it in comparison to the stuff you read all the time, like how'd you feel about that? Did you have problems going left to right?
I did actually, yes. I did initially have a problem with that. Like I was very confused for the first page, and then I remembered, oh yes, it's American. And then a few pages later, because manga tends to have this, like a first few pages sometimes have a color, and then it just kept on going. And for a moment again, I was very confused, like, is this gonna be fully colored? I know there is I think it's a Korean form that's kind of similar to manga. I can't remember what it's called, but that is fully colored.
Manhwa?
But, yeah, I think so. It's
Solo Leveling is this, right?
Yeah, Solo Leveling is this. And I think there is a version of God of High School in that kind of coloring, but that I think is Japanese. But still, it was I did really like I think my feelings with the color is, I think it's best explained if I give an example. There is the scene in Attack on Titan, spoilers to everyone, where Armin essentially becomes a nuclear device and explodes a harbor. And the black and white is really touching, but it is when you get that color in the animation version where it's really like, it really reminded me of that video of Oppenheimer going, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. Like there is a more emotional connection with the color. And I do feel like, especially since this is very detailed art, but it is still not level of something like Berserk. But sure. I feel like the color helps alleviate that. Like it gives you that emotional connection that you would normally get from the stunning amount of detail. But at the same time, it's not too busy, like Berserk sometimes can be very busy. So I think it's the color was probably the biggest like shock to me, like how much it affects the reading experience. And of course, there are other differences, like the character style, manga and anime, very much more cartoony, whilst this is trying to be far more like realistic. And of course, there's more realistic manga as well, but that's not the norm.
Right.
Whereas I think this is the norm with American comics, that it is very sort of realistic.
More or less, definitely more on that side than, people getting punched through 8 mountains and,
yeah.
Oh, my shirt's not even ripped. So But yeah, very, very much more. And I think that's a good point with the detail level between the two, to compare and contrast, both sides of the coin. Manga definitely, because it's in black and white, I think it lends itself to adding more detail easier and really filling out those pages. The good artists, the good creators really fill out those pages and pad in things and give you plenty of detail in the background, or even just if it's a character splash page, the color can kind of cover up some of the less detailed things with the shading. But in manga, those black and white pen strokes are just, they're good, man. They hit right sometimes.
Yeah, and I feel like manga needs that more, and then it allows you to, with color, you can play a lot with lighting and stuff.
Yeah.
And in manga, I feel like it's a very difficult thing to do, unless you're Junji Ito or someone. But it's like, I very much like to see since they do play a lot with colors, shading, the warmth of colors, that sort of stuff. And I feel like I get the same thing from manga, but in a very different sense, since you have those amazingly detailed, full page images, and then they might do the same effect with lack of detail rather than lack of light or lack of saturation in color, which I found very fascinating.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I love it though. I appreciate the differences of the coin, and I think that they both have their strengths, and it's fun to be someone that flips between them a lot, and you can really see and explore. And the last person I had on this, they were a comic person. I had them read My Hero, the first volume of My Hero. And so kind of culture shock the other way. And so they had problems reading from right to left. And but one thing they kept bringing up is man, the art is so dynamic. The fights are dynamic. There's motion in the pages that doesn't always get conveyed in American comics when you have that color over it, or just the difference of art style, of how it's drawn. It doesn't lend itself and doesn't give the room for those really, aggressive, detail-oriented, punches and throws and things like that.
Absolutely. And if you go all the way to the other side of the dynamic of manga drawing, you get someone like Tatsuki Fujimoto, who draws things like Fire Punch or Chainsaw Man. He knows how to play with the page and layouts and everything. And that's, at least not in Wonder Woman, I didn't really get that sense, since a lot of manga do play with layouts and stuff to create that sense of motion in just the way the images are laid out on a page. But of course, Fujimoto being probably the best one to do that.
He might
but
be.
It still didn't feel like there weren't that many big fights in the Wonder Woman, but it still felt dynamic. But it was more stationary, weird. Of course, it's all stationary, just images, but...
Yeah. No, for sure. And a lot of the paneling, I think, in Immortal Wonder Woman was pretty basic, very conservative. Yeah. They didn't really try to go out. If you... Miles Morales has a series out right now for Spider-Man, and that artist and creative team do a really good job of, breaking panels and making it a lot more fluid, as opposed to kind of the strict, 3 on the top, 2 going down, and kind of that box style that I think we got in Immortal Wonder Woman for the most part. I think part of that shows Jen Partel's inexperience with doing interior artwork for a whole book.
Yes,
like I said, she's very much a cover artist that hops on the interiors very sparsely.
Yeah. But at the same time, I feel like there is certain strength in that cover artist thing, because it is the level of detail is more than I'd expect. Of course, my point of comparison is the 40K comics from the Western side of things.
Right.
But they tend to be more, I don't want to say lacking in detail, but it's not quite that, there isn't that depth between the background and the characters that was in Wonder Woman. It's more like character, and then there's just something in the background.
That's a good point. And a lot of American comics fall into that with, maybe the main character, whatever's on screen looks real good, and there's just not much going on in the background. They don't fill it out. They don't, I really like it when creators use the background to further the story and what they're trying to say, adding in those little details, kind of how we mentioned with One Piece earlier. The small things, I think, really add up. And I think a lot of, especially Western creators, fall a little short on that, and they don't fill out those pages well.
Absolutely. Like, of course, there is a precedent to be made that if the background is uninspiring, then it just draws attention to what's in the foreground. Like, that is something the My Hero anime does really well. But after a while, it just starts to feel lazy if the backgrounds are just space filler, essentially, which, of course, they are, but still.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And kind of with that, within Immortal Wonder Woman, I think that the absence of the background was helpful in this because of,
Yes.
the tones it's setting, the what it's trying to tell us as far as, the end is coming, that like you're all that's left. And I think that that really benefited Jen Bartel a lot in her art because of how vibrant the colors, the transition between the contrast between the
Oh, yes.
characters in the
Absolutely.
background. And I think that really let her art shine, and kind of, scenes like that are more accustomed to a cover art as opposed to that interior art with a lot of like Diana in space and a lot of the scenes they set up. So I think she played to her strengths, and overall it was really good. But just some comparison. That's all.
Yeah, and there was, I think this comes from the cover art thing as well, but some of the setups, like when she was approaching Spectre, for example, in space, that felt like a very cinematic kind of a shot, like looking into the whose head is Spectre sitting on, the giant head in space. Like that felt almost like a scene from like you'd see in a movie where the camera would suddenly start to approach the head,
Yeah.
which I feel like comes from the habit of like being more familiar with drawing big things that people stare at for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Really
Like
fun though.
the setup of the panels themselves was, it felt a bit different, but I feel like it felt more cover arty, which again you've explained why.
Yes. 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 But yeah, yeah, like I said, I enjoyed it. I love the. I talked about this already, but the kind of the meaning they wanted to go behind it with the everything's ending and fun direction. Overall, pretty solid little read. I thought this was whenever I reached out to you, this was my first time to read Immortal Wonder Woman. So that's when I
Yeah.
started my read throughs and kind of getting into it a little bit. And so I didn't know what to expect at all. And I didn't think I expected that. And honestly, when I picked up the whole thing and I'm like, this is only 2 issues long, I was like, I really did not expect it to be so short. And I was like, oh man, are they gonna get through this? Like, what is this? It's only 2 issues. But it worked out in the end.
Yeah, it worked out really well, and I was very much in the same boat. Like when I started reading it, I wasn't sure what to expect, but it was most definitely not what we got. But what we got was really good.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. So any final thoughts on Immortal Wonder Woman? You want to loop back in here?
Well, of course, the first thought is that I would recommend people read it because it was such a different approach that I think that's very enlightening. Having that kind of like reading different things, even if it's in the same medium, is always, it broadens your horizons. So naturally, I'd do that, and it maybe gives you a bit more detail if you know more about DC. Like for example, I was very confused about what's the guy who came to fight Superman. I have such a bad memory.
Dark Side.
Yep, Darkseid. Like if you know his background, and same thing with Swamp Thing. Like why is he a tree all of a sudden? Like I get the feeling that helps, but at the same time, like not knowing these details didn't take away from my experience
No.
of reading it. So I think it was a very good, complete package in a very short form. And to manga readers, anime fans, this might be a good stepping stone to Western comics in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I hope also to spread. I like to spread the good word per se for these Western comics. And yeah, it was a fun it's a good jump on point. It's a good low commitment read to see the other side.
Yes, definitely.
And I'm big on that. I love that. But manga is still anymore. I'm probably 50-50, but I probably read just a little more manga than I do American comics, I would assume. Because I try to keep up with all my series and
Yeah.
read try to some new things that are coming out here and there. As you said, it is the spring release season for anime. So I have recently started Hell's Paradise. I checked that out.
Oh, yes, that is very good.
Pretty good. I was, after the first 2 episodes of Hell's Paradise, I was like, this is okay. I don't know. And then I get to the end of that 3rd episode and I'm like, okay, here's what we're getting at. Like,
Yeah.
here's what the story we're gonna tell. Okay, I'm in for this. I can get behind this.
Yeah, I do find it actually, speaking of Hell's Paradise, I find it interesting how neutered the anime is in comparison to the manga, because the manga is really graphic detail violence.
I
And
believe that.
there is, there is that in the anime as well, but it is very neutered in comparison, which I found interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
It's still, it's still good.
It's solid. It's solid. Have you read up on Hell's Paradise? Like, do you know the future?
A bit of it. I'm not entirely caught up, but I'm currently in the process of reading it.
Okay, okay. I think it's something I'm gonna stick with. I'm gonna, 4 episodes out. I assume it's on a week-to-week release schedule.
Yep. I
So
think it's going to be 12 episodes, if memory serves.
okay, okay. I appreciate it. I do like the guilty pleasure. I do kind of like the violent animes, because I think the anime death is some of the most beautifully drawn and best deaths that you can get. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I think they just do death and violence a little better than other things do.
Yeah,
which lends itself to Hell's Paradise and what they're going to get into very well.
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of death in that series.
I imagine. Yeah, it's fun. Kind of reminds me a little bit of it's like Chainsaw Man Island a little bit as far as the creatures.
Oh yeah.
Which is pretty dope. I was whenever they get on the island and that big thing comes out, it has like the hands out of its eyes, and the real tall thing they show in like episode 3 and 4. I was like, oh my god, like look at that thing. That thing's like that's a devil. We gotta kill it. We gotta take it out.
Yeah. It's an interesting style. It's a very, I like going to Hell's Paradise. I really like there's so much like almost hidden religious iconography in all of it that of course most of us here in the West don't get. But I like reading the manga, I did look into it a little bit, and it's like everything has some kind of a deep religious meaning. And that just like the attention to detail in that form really blew my mind.
That adds another layer, because very much the island of heaven or whatever, that's good. That's something I'll have to look out for. I'll have to read up on as far as what all religious stuff they push in there to help fill out the world as far as the story they're telling. I think it's so cool. I think they're doing a good job so far. Like I said, only 4 episodes in, so we'll see. But from what you say, I got to stick with it now. I got to watch it.
It is very good. That's actually an interesting point with American comics and manga, because American comics, I feel like they are more directed towards everyone, while manga still has that air of it's a Japanese product for Japanese people. So there is so much detail about Japanese culture that we just don't understand.
That's a good point. That's really smart. Yeah. And you just see it, just the culture. It's such a Japanese culture thing. Like like a lot of Western comics, like everybody goes to the grocery store, everybody goes to high school, but you go to a lot of these Japanese titles and it's like, oh, this is what it's like being in school in Japan. Like their customs, they really dive into it a lot more than you get on the other side.
Yeah, admittedly, at the same time, I feel like in that respect, Western comics are more approachable, especially to us. Of course, we are from the West,
right?
But it's an interesting. Like I do still think you can fully enjoy anime and manga even if you don't get it. But there is that like hidden element which I find very fascinating. Just reading about like what did they hide and where. Or not even hide, but like add that we just don't know.
Yeah, that we don't. It doesn't register for us. Yeah. Where if you're in that culture, it registers immediately, and you get a little deeper level. Man, I love that. I love when stories can just dig just a little deeper in things. And I think that's so cool and so fun. And one of the reasons why I love manga so much, because a lot of times you get a deeper story as far as the symbolism and everything that goes into it. While American comics have that, Western comics, like you said, they're built for everyone. It feels like they're not as targeted. They don't take a lot of risks. Where it just in what's coming out in like Shonen Jump right now. Just I read off the app a lot, so that's where I get a lot. So much of it is man, you want to read about sports. You like sports. You like what is it? Traditional Japanese storytelling and how they do that. You want You want battle, you can get that. You want just a love story. Hey, man, we got something for you here. And that diversity in their product is something that Western comics does not do very well. A lot of what you get is very, I don't want to call it generic, but generic across the board, where, because DC and Marvel together put out probably 100 plus titles a month, and 80% of them or more is kind of all the same superhero shtick that we've seen and we've read and we enjoy, but there's not a lot of innovation and not a lot of risk to, hey, let's tell a different kind of story, or let's focus on something smaller, or just this one aspect.
Yeah, I kind of get the same feeling from 40K, because of course you have in Warhammer everything's war, so you have the like war hero stories, you have something that's maybe like a detective story with Eisenhorn, or a little bit of comedy or horror, and then you go to manga or anime and you get something like JoJo's, which is just bizarre, or a shonen, or you can have a rom-com, and then suddenly you watch something like Nichijou, which is just doesn't make any sense, but you're laughing your head off anyway. Which is like, that kind of discrepancy from one show to the next is just unparalleled anywhere else.
It is. It really is. It's funny you mention a show that makes no sense. Have you ever watched Fully Cooley or FLCL?
A little bit, not much, but I have a little bit of experience with it.
I have read it, I have watched it, and then I'll watch reviews for it, and people be like, "Yeah, this is the story of like, puberty and coming of age," and I'm like, "What?" Like, there's so many wild things happening that it's like, man, you really got to dig down to see that, and it's like, it's a ridiculous series. I mean, like I'm a big JoJo's guy. JoJo's is ridiculous, but Fully Cooley is like, what am I reading? What is this?
Yeah. From my very brief experience, it very much reminds me of, if I make a comparison to manga or anime side of things, something like Danshikoku-sen or Nichijou, or just Nichijou, like these really over-the-top, weird slice of life things where what happens just doesn't matter, so they do whatever they want.
Which is kind of fun. I wish Western comics would take a little bit more risks, especially with such a wide lineup of titles.
Yeah.
And not all of them sell well. I always think about, we always say, oh, manga's destroying comics. And it's like, we're only getting like the cream of the crop over here. There's probably a lot of titles there that never make it off the ground. We see a few times things get canceled early. Red Hood was a manga series, I think, that came out maybe last year before.
I think so, yeah.
And I was like, man, this is good. Like, I'm kind of into this. It's kind of Demon Slayer-ish with fairy tales. And then it got canceled early. And I was like, well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's probably the best example of stuff that we just never see comes from isekai, the isekai genre. So somebody gets hit by a truck and wakes up in a fantasy world or something. I think it was Gigak, who is like the biggest anime YouTuber currently, mentioned that there's a web page where people can leave their isekai stories, and this is where most isekai anime comes from, and there was like 100,000 editions a month. So like 99.99% of them never see the light of day.
Oh man, isekai, that whole genre really gets me thinking. Like, I remember when it first kind of started coming around, and it was like, oh, this is awesome, man, this is cool. And like anymore, it's like, man, this is kind of like Japanese fanfic almost at this point.
Yeah, now it's like, it used to be like, oh my god, this is so cool, and everyone has new ideas, and now it's like, it's the same fantasy world, it's the same overpowered protagonist, this one has a smartphone, this one came here with their mum, kind of thing. It just stagnated so hard. I mean, there's still some gems in there, but the average isekai is pretty crap.
It is, but I mean, that's all right. R.I.P. to that genre. I mean, it'll still be there. It'll come around. There'll be a big one that comes out for us eventually again. But right now, it's
there's going to be a second season of probably the biggest isekai currently. I think it's coming out in July. There's going to be the second season of Mushoku Tensei, which is like, that's one of the really good isekais. And then in the same season, you're going to have, what is it called? Like, the premise alone is really stupid, because now they've gone from people reincarnating as super powerful heroes into inanimate objects. So there is currently a meme going on that they announced an anime for I died and got reincarnated as a vending machine, which is literally the main character is a vending machine.
Love it.
It makes no sense. It's a wild genre.
It is a wild genre. Talk about putting a risk out there, really putting something different out there.
Yeah, you mentioned that Western comics don't do risks. Well, sometimes that's a good thing, I think.
Sometimes we don't need a superhero vending machine. You're right.
Yeah,
That
though
might be too
admittedly,
much.
the Western comics are such an established IP that it would be cool if they tried doing something really out there, which I think the Wonder Woman comic we read did something very different. So
I agree.
there is precedent that it might work, but just don't take it too far.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And you mentioned the legacy. You know, DC and Marvel's had almost 100 years
Yeah,
of these characters holding around, and I'm really big on this legacy character argument as far as eventually you just run out of things for them to do, and that is a distinctly Western problem because as we are maybe seeing with Dragon Ball, I know you're not a Dragon Ball guy, but we
yeah,
will eventually get tired and we won't know what to do with these characters without continual escalation. But like what do you do with Superman after he's been around since the 30s? Like how many new stories can you milk from this stone? Um, between switching creative teams every year or two, or sometimes in the middle of a run they'll switch creative teams, and it's like it gets to be a mess a little bit, which I'm glad that
yeah,
Immortal Wonder Woman for you was an easy in, because getting into comics, at least my experience and what I hear a lot in the community, is it's kind of tough because where do I start? Like I like Superman, I want to read things about Spider-Man, but I can't just start at number one because there's 50 number ones out there.
yeah. Absolutely. Like that's the problem I've always had with trying to get into Western comics is that it's not a linear story, so it's very hard to get into. Like it's kind of like Fate for anyone who's trying to get into Fate in anime side of things. It's one of those, like, nothing is in the order it came out, and of course 100 years, like Fate's been out around for like maybe 20 years,
Yeah.
and it's already a massive mess. So I can just imagine what 100 years and probably even more than 100 different creative teams working on it does to like trying to get into a series.
It makes it tough. Best advice is when a new number one comes out, like if you want to read Spider-Man, like we're on issue 24 right now, so it's been going for about almost 2 years, and start with the beginning of a run. That's the best way to do it, and you just kind of got to explore around from there. But there's going to be some trial and error when it comes to finding what series is good. But I find a lot of times if everyone thinks it's good, usually it's pretty good,
Yeah.
more or less. I like the mass appeal of it.
Yeah. Do Western comics, are these runs like their individual own stories that don't connect to other ones, or is there like interconnectivity between runs?
It
You
depends on
have the
who.
multiverse.
It depends on who takes over, and
Okay.
that kind of sucks about it because, well, they will connect to the previous runs that were previous to them, or sometimes they'll do callbacks to the 70s every now and then, just depending on what character and what's going on. But sometimes it's a whole new story. Sometimes you gotta know all this other stuff first, and that makes it tough too. So even
Yeah.
me saying, hey, just go pick out a number one, but if you have zero idea of, for example, how did Miles Morales get his powers, how did he become Spider-Man, you can be a little lost there because
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't even know who this character is.
Yeah. Everyone knows Peter Parker's origin story, but of course, how many Spider-Mans do we have now?
Arguably too many.
Maybe.
Definitely too many if we include Dan Slott's run right now, but yeah. But between Peter and Miles, really, those are the two you need to focus on. Those are the two big ones, and I'm a huge Miles fan. He's right now, he has a better book out than Peter Parker for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is
Peter is the original, right?
Peter is the original. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I know something. Yay. And yeah, of course, there is the whole multiverse thing. Is the multiverse present in everything DC does?
I mean, you could argue it is, because you could say this Wonder Woman story just took place in a different universe, and if you don't want to follow the storylines, or if the artist or creative team gets switched, you're like, that happened somewhere else. We're gonna start fresh going forward. So
yeah, and that's actually interesting. Is it's the multiverse works on a dimensional basis, correct?
I believe so.
And the Undoing was an interdimensional being. Like, I think that maybe even has deeper connotations than I realized, that it's a interdimensional thing that just eats everything.
The end of the multiverse. It'll be another crisis, and they'll reboot it. So don't worry, it'll come back.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
but it's fun. But yeah, like I said, hard to get into that, but manga's easy. You just start in issue 1, and that's
Yeah.
all you got to do. Complete story. If you don't like the ending, though, you can just have that bad taste in your mouth forever because you won't get another opportunity. You won't get a spinoff. But
yeah, all the chances are that it was the studio's choosing ending, and the manga is gonna do something else later on, like with what happened with Evangelion.
yeah, oh right, that's a good example because
Yeah,
talk about reboots and recasts. You know what I mean? Like between the movies and the original series, and Evangelical's kind of a mess. I really did my best to get into it. I watched the original run, and then I watched a random movie. I don't know which one it was.
I think the correct way of doing Evangelion is watch the original run, forget the ending happened, and watch movie number 1. I think has the sort of correct ending that the mangaka intended.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. There's like 6 movies at this point.
Yeah,
They literally released a new one this year.
They all have different endings too, right? They're all the same story, but they all end differently.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then sometimes you just get really lucky, like what happened with Bleach, because of course Bleach kind of sort of ended because it just stopped being popular. So Shonen Jump dropped it. And I think they told the mangaka that he has like a month to finish his entire story. So the original ending was really bad, but of course last year Bleach came back.
It returned
sometimes sometimes that happens even in the manga and anime world. It's rare, but it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, are you a JoJo's guy?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so Stone Ocean has been out for long enough, so to spoil that, the resetting of the JoJo's universe happened for the first time there in Stone Ocean, which was needed. I think that was when Araki stopped doing weekly serialization too. I think Still Well Run, I believe, was like month to month.
It might have even been like every 2 months.
It was I know it was spaced out. I'm not sure.
It was. Admittedly, I think the volumes were longer, but there was a significant amount of time, and I don't think it was even like evenly split between different months. But
yeah. So you see it sometimes. I don't know. This current JoJo Lands run this is the first time I've been JoJo's week to week, which is exciting.
Yeah,
very exciting. I will always have a soft spot for JoJo's. It makes me so happy, man. I love that series. It's so ridiculous, and just I'm a big sub watcher. I think sub over dubs. There's some dubs that are good. I'm not gonna down it, but man, the voice acting's good, and just the bad English translations make me so happy. Oh my gosh, just I could hear Dio say "Stendo Power" like a million times a day and be happy. And just you get into part 6 and you got all the American bands, for the names, and I love it. It's such a layer on things and sub that you just don't get with the dub.
Yeah, I'm very much in the boat of doing subs over dubs as well. Like when I was doing videos, of course, I didn't want subs on my videos, and before finding ways to remove subs from the clips I got, I had to watch dubs, and I remember that My Hero Academia's dub is especially horrendous. Like that is really bad.
I mean, All Might's pretty good. I love Chris Sabat, but yeah, it's hit or miss. It's hit or miss.
Yeah, I think it's more like the fact that I've watched so much subbed, and I feel like they get the voices for the characters just right in the original subs, and then some of the voices in the English just don't fit the characters, and sometimes they even change the entire character. Like Lieutenant Tsuremi from Golden Kamuy is probably the best example of just completely changing the character because of how they speak. Because in the Japanese, he's like a psychopath who's lost a part of his brain to an artillery shell, and he's just batshit insane. And then in the English one, he's just kind of like this run-of-the-mill, like Marvel bad guy, just a normal evil dude. Like all of the madness is gone.
Yeah. I like that. That's a good, One Piece is another good example. Like the laughs, just the quirkiness. I don't know why it lends itself so much better to Japanese because they, like you said, the voice actors just nail it, man. It's like I think over there, if I'm right, they that's a point of emphasis is like voice acting for their series, where over here there's like 5 people that do it, and they just do different characters for different series.
Yeah.
It feels like
It's in the Japanese world of voice acting, it's more like you become it's more like acting than voice acting, but you're just not on camera. I get that kind of feeling.
Yeah, you can feel that. You can feel it when you watch it and you experience it, because it's just better. It's a cut better than the dubs are. And that's me, only knowing the English dubs, but I am sure the other dubs for other countries are probably about on the same level, I would assume.
I think the best non-Japanese voice acting I've ever heard is German dubs for JoJo's. Like Dio in
awesome.
German is just amazing.
God, I'm gonna have to look that up now. Like I gotta look up some German Dio, because
there are scenes of like where they film the voice actor doing it, and it's like he's acting Dio, and it's just awesome, and it really comes through in the voice lines.
Nice.
That is something I'd recommend go look up. It's really good.
I'll have to check that out for sure.
But yeah, at least Finnish dubs tend to be pretty bad. We still make jokes about really old, really terrible Finnish dubs.
I believe it. It happens. It's a plague that will always be with us. But
oh yeah.
But all right, man. Well, that's close to the end of it. I'm gonna let you, if you want to. I'm gonna put you up here big, and if you want to plug anything, like if you want to plug your channel. Oh gosh, there you go. There you go.
Okay.
Got anything to say? The time is yours.
No, I don't have that much to say. Hi everyone, I'm Added Cheese. I do anime and manga related content over on YouTube. Currently more anime focused, because I am in the very unfortunate position of reading far too much for university to read off my computer screen any manga. So it's more anime focused right now, but the manga's gonna be there. I try to be very critical in everything, because I am a linguist by trade, and I've done far too many linguistic academic book reviews, and I just kind of try to translate that into my anime reviews, try to be critical and as objective as I can, although it's sometimes very hard to be objective about things you enjoy. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do over here on the interwebs. So you can go and check out my channel over on YouTube as well, under the exact same name of Added Cheese.
Yes, and it'll all be in the link in the description below. I'll make sure I give you a good plug and all that. Your content really is good. Like I enjoy your YouTube channel a lot.
That is very nice to hear.
I mean that. It's really cool. It was awesome whenever I asked to have you on. I was like, oh, this is awesome. This dude does good work, and it'll be fun to sit down and talk with you, because you have a good perspective about things. So it's a little different. You watch so much anime YouTubers over the years, and I think you have a good little different perspective and a different twist on it. And I really appreciate that. So I think you do awesome work, and everyone definitely needs to head over and give your channel checked out and give you a sub and all the YouTube jargon that we have.
All the YouTube stuff.
All the stuff we have to say. But
yeah, I've been actually really enjoying your content as well. I've been listening to some of the podcasts, and you have some very interesting, like very different points of view from you coming from the American comics. Like that just offers a different perspective, and I really enjoy your stuff as well.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that, and thanks for coming on. And yeah, we'll do it again sometime, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I'm up for it.
Yeah,
it was good fun, and it was really fun to like talk about something that I'm not very familiar with.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad that you say that, because that's, again, part of the reason we do this. But
yeah,
all right, man. Well, everybody, we'll see you next time on this, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your days.
Indeed.